The sound it made. That is what I remember most. Not the sting. Not the shame. The sound. A crack, sharp as a gunshot, ricocheting off all that polished marble, up into the crystal chandeliers and back down again like it wanted everyone in the building to hear it twice. And then the silence. That terrible, expensive silence. Sloane stood over me with her hand still trembling in the air, her chest rising and falling, and she said the words she would spend the rest of her life trying to unsay. "Get this filth out of my lobby." She had no idea. She had absolutely no idea whose mother she had just knocked to the floor. So let me back up. Because to understand how a woman in a coat that cost $12 ended up bleeding on a floor worth more than the house I raised my son in, you have to understand where that coat came from. You have to go back 3 weeks, and then 30 years before that. Come with me. My hands tell the whole story, if you ever bother to look at a person's hands. They are old now. The knuckles are swollen. There are little brown spots the color of weak tea, and a scar across the left palm from a broken glass in room 412 of the Bellamy Hotel, sometime around the winter of 1994. I cleaned rooms at the Bellamy for 31 years. 31 years of stripped beds and scrub tubs and toilets that strangers left in states I will not describe to you. I was good at it. I want you to know that. People say that like it is nothing being good at cleaning, but there is a difference between a room that looks clean and a room that is clean, and I knew the difference in my bones. I could turn a wreck suite into something that felt like a fresh start in 19 minutes. I timed myself. I was proud of it. And every single day, I carried a brass pin on my chest that said housekeeping, and under that, my name, Loretta. I still have that pin. It sits in a chipped teacup on my kitchen windowsill in a small apartment on the west side of the city, where the radiator knocks all night and the window sticks in the summer. I keep it there because it reminds me of who I am when I am tempted to forget. My husband, Elijah, gave me that first coat, the good brown wool one. He bought it the year we married, and when he passed, I could not bear to buy another, so I kept mending that one. A button came loose 2 winters ago, and I could not find a match, so I fastened it with a little brass safety pin, and I told myself I would fix it properly someday. Elijah died young. I will not put the numbers on the table for you, because the arithmetic of losing a husband when your son is still small enough to fall asleep on your shoulder is not the kind of math that helps anybody. I will only tell you that after that it was me. Just me. Me and the boy. His name is Julian. I raised that child on double shifts and coupons and prayers I whispered on the last bus home. When he was small, I would come in past midnight and find his little shoes lined up by the door, laces still tied because he refused to untie them, waiting for me to loosen them like I always did. That is one of the objects I keep in the back of my mind like a photograph. A pair of small shoes by a door, laces still tied. I do not need a picture of it. It is burned into me. I taught him everything I knew, which was not much on paper, and everything that mattered in life. I taught him to say thank you and to mean it. I taught him that a locked door is not a wall. It is a test of your patience. And one thing I said to him so many times that he used to finish it for me in a bored little voice. I would say, "Julian, be kind to the ones who carry the trays." And he would roll his eyes and say, "Because they see everything, and they remember everyone." He thought it was a lecture. It was a map. I was trying to hand my son a map of how to move through the world without leaving wreckage behind him. He grew up sharp. Sharp in school, sharp with numbers, sharp with people in the way that makes them feel seen. He got a scholarship. I remember the suit I bought him for his first real interview. I put it on layaway in September and paid it off by December, a little each week, and when I finally brought it home in a plastic garment bag, he put it on and stood in front of the mirror, and I watched a boy turn into a man in about 4 seconds. He got the job. Then a better one. Then he stopped taking jobs and started building things. And my son, my Julian, the boy whose shoelaces I untied at midnight, built an empire out of the exact thing I spent my life inside of. Hotels. Vane Hospitality Group. You have probably stayed in one of his buildings without knowing his story. glass towers with his name discreet on the door. And now, the crown of all of it, a flagship he had been dreaming about for years. The Aurelia, the most beautiful hotel in the city, they said. A palace. I should have been the happiest mother alive. And for a while I was. Here is where I have to tell you the part that still makes my throat tight. Somewhere in the last 2 years, my son disappeared from my life. Not all at once. That is not how these things happen. If your child vanished all at once, you would raise the alarm. It happened the way water leaves a glass on a warm day. Slowly, quietly. You look up one afternoon and the glass is empty and you cannot say exactly when it happened. We used to talk every Sunday. Every single Sunday, 7 o'clock, without fail, 4 years. He would call and I would put him on the little speaker and cook while we talked. And he would tell me about deals I did not understand and I would tell him about the neighbor's cat. And neither of us cared about the words. We just wanted the sound of each other. Then one Sunday he did not call. He is busy, I told myself. He runs a company now. He will call next week. The next week, a woman answered his phone. Crisp, efficient. Mr. Vane's office. I said, "This is his mother." And there was the smallest pause, the kind you would miss if you had not spent 31 years reading the pauses of people who did not want you in their rooms. And then she said, "He is in a meeting. I will let him know you called." He did not call back. I told myself 100 kind stories. He is under pressure. The opening is coming. Big men get pulled in 100 directions. I did not want to be the mother who nags, who guilts, who makes herself a weight around her successful son's neck. That was my pride, and I will own it as a fault because it was one. I would rather ache in silence than be a burden. So I ached in silence. I started writing letters. Real letters on the good paper in my careful hand. I wrote about small things. The church. My knees. A recipe. I never once asked him for money, because I did not want a single dollar of his. I only wanted my boy. The first letter came back. Return to sender. I thought I had the address wrong. I checked it 3 times. It was right. The second one came back too. By the 5th returned letter, I stopped mailing them and started keeping them. A shoebox filled up on the top shelf of my closet. Every envelope stamped and refused. And I could not throw them away because throwing them away felt like throwing away the last thread between us. And do you know the story I told myself in the dark on the nights the radiator knocked? I told myself my son was ashamed of me. I thought, he has that life now, that glass and marble life, and somewhere in it he decided that a mother who cleaned toilets for 31 years is not a mother you want showing up. That his people, whoever they were, had let him know that a woman like me does not belong in a lobby like his. I believed that about my own child, and it broke something in me that I did not know could break at my age. But hold on to that. Hold on to the shape of what I believed. Because I was wrong about almost all of it, and the truth was so much uglier than shame. I found out about the opening from a stranger's television. I was in the laundromat on a Tuesday, folding towels, and the screen bolted up in the corner was running one of those local business segments. And there was my son, Julian, in a charcoal suit, standing in front of a building so beautiful it did not look real, cutting a ribbon. The reporter's voice said the flagship of Vane Hospitality Group would open to the public that Friday with a private gala, and that the reclusive founder rarely gave interviews. I stood there with a warm towel pressed to my chest like a child holding a blanket, and I watched my son touch his cufflink. His father's cufflinks. Elijah's. I gave them to Julian the day he graduated. And there they were, on my son's wrist, on a television in a laundromat, on a man who had not spoken to me in 2 years. That was the moment something in me stood up. I was not invited. Understand that. My own son was opening the most important building of his life, and no one had thought to send his mother a card. And instead of making me smaller, that fact made me stubborn. Because here is another one of my faults, and it is the one that got me into all of this. I am stubborn. Elijah used to say I could outweigh a stone. I decided I was going to go to that hotel and I was going to look my son in the eye. not to make a scene, not to embarrass him in front of his glittering people. I just needed to stand in front of him so that whatever he had decided about me, he would have to decide it to my face. Friday came. I did not have a gown, and even if I had, I would not have worn it because I was not going as a guest. I went as myself. I wore the brown wool coat with the safety pin. I put my hair up. I put Elijah's handkerchief in my pocket. And I put that brass housekeeping pin in my purse, though I could not have told you why. Something told me to bring the truth of who I was with me. I took 2 buses across the city in the cold, and I stood on the sidewalk outside the Aurelia, and I looked up. It was the most beautiful building I had ever seen. Gold light pouring out of tall windows, a doorway framed in stone, and people gliding in furs and jewels and shoes that had never touched a sidewalk with grit on it. And I thought, my son built this. My son. From nothing. From a woman with a mop and a pair of small shoes by a door. I took a breath, and I walked toward the light. The first face I met was kind, and I want to say his name because he matters. Theo. A young man at the door, maybe 22, in a uniform a size too big for him, with the nervous good manners of somebody who needed this job badly. When I came up the steps, some part of me expecting to be turned away right there, he did not turn me away. He opened the door for me. He said, "Good evening, ma'am. Careful, that top step is slick. Careful, that top step is slick." Such a small thing. But it was the last kind sentence anyone in that building would say to me for a long time, and I have never forgotten it. I stepped inside, and the warmth wrapped around me, and the marble ran on forever, and above it all hung chandeliers like frozen fountains. And that is where she found me. Sloane Whitaker, the director of the front of house. I know her name now the way you know the name of a storm that took your roof. She was tall and precise, blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, a black dress, a little tablet held against her chest like a shield. She moved through that lobby like she owned it, and she spotted me the way a hawk spots something small in a field. She came straight at me. No greeting. She looked at my coat. She looked at my safety pin. She looked at my shoes, which were sensible and old, and I watched her do the arithmetic that people like her do in half a second, the arithmetic that decides whether you are a person or a problem. She decided I was a problem. "Ma'am," she said, and she put a little wall of ice around the word. "I think you may be in the wrong place. I am looking for Julian Vane," I said. Something flickered across her face. Amusement. She almost smiled. "Mr. Vane is hosting a private event this evening," she said. "It is invitation only. If you would like to inquire about a public reservation, our website has all the information." "I do not want a reservation," I said. "I need to speak with Julian." She heard me use his first name, and it landed on her like an insult. Who was this woman, in a mended coat, saying the great man's name like she knew him? "That is not possible," she said. "Please," I said, "if you would just tell him that his mother is here." And there it was. I watched it happen. I watched her hear the word mother, and I watched her not believe it for even 1 second. In her mind, my son was a legend in a charcoal suit, a man on television, and I was a woman who had wandered in off the cold sidewalk with a story. To her, the two things could not touch. They came from different worlds, and worlds like that do not mix. She actually laughed. A small, disbelieving breath through her nose. "His mother," she repeated. "Of course you are." She lifted her tablet like she was going to make a note of my delusion. "Ma'am, I am going to have to ask you to leave. There is a shelter about 4 blocks east if you need somewhere warm." A shelter. I felt my face go hot. Not from shame. From something older and harder than shame. "I am not going to any shelter," I said, and my voice was steadier than I expected. "I am going to stand right here until my son comes down those stairs. Here is where I have to pull the camera back, as they say, and show you the thing I did not know was happening. Because while I was standing in that lobby being called a delusion, there was a man on the mezzanine above me who was the real reason I was ever there in the first place. His name is Adrian Cole. Adrian was my son's right hand. His chief operating officer, his oldest colleague, the man who had been beside Julian since the very early days when the whole company was 2 men and a laptop in a rented office. Adrian was smooth, gray suits always, a thin smile, a tablet in his hand at all times, like it was grafted on. He had built himself up out of nothing too, and there was a hunger in him that never turned off, even after the money came. I did not know Adrian well. I had met him once years before at a dinner. He had been polite to my face, and I had felt, the way you feel a draft in a room, that he was measuring me, measuring what I was worth to him, and finding the number small. What I did not know, standing in that lobby, was this. For 2 years, Adrian Cole had been the wall between me and my son. It was Adrian who told his assistants that any calls from a woman claiming to be Mr. Vane's mother should be handled personally by him and never put through. It was Adrian who arranged for my letters to be marked return to sender before they ever reached Julian's desk. And it was Adrian who, whenever Julian mentioned me, whenever my son said, I really should call my mother this Sunday, would say the poison so gently that it sounded like wisdom. I did reach out on your behalf, Julian. Truthfully, I do not think she wants to be part of all this. She was very clear. She values her privacy. She does not want your money. She does not want the spotlight. She does not want to be, and these are close to her words, paraded around. I think the most respectful thing you can do is give her space. That is what my son had been hearing for 2 years. That his mother had chosen to disappear. That she was proud and private, and did not want his glittering life anywhere near her. That reaching out was disrespecting her wishes. And why? Why would a man do that? I have thought about this more than I have thought about almost anything. And the honest answer is not that Adrian was a monster. The honest answer is worse than that because it is human. Adrian had watched Julian build an empire on cold, clear decisions. And Adrian believed, truly believed, that a mother in the picture would make Julian soft. That a man with a mother he adored would start writing checks to the wrong causes, would let sentiment cloud the business, would look at a woman with a mop and remember he came from somewhere and start acting like it. Adrian thought he was protecting the empire. And underneath that quieter was the other thing. If Julian had his mother back, then Julian would have someone else he trusted more than Adrian. Adrian had spent 15 years being the only person in the world Julian truly relied on. He was not going to give that up to a woman in a mended coat. So he built a wall, and he told himself the wall was a kindness. And that Friday night, Adrian Cole was standing on the mezzanine, tablet in hand, when he looked down over the railing and saw a woman in a brown wool coat with a safety pin, arguing with his front-of-house director. And his blood ran cold, because he recognized me. He knew, in that instant, that 2 years of careful lies were about to collapse into a marble lobby full of the most important people in the city. And instead of coming down to help me, Adrian Cole did the thing that tells you exactly who a man is. He took out his phone, and he texted Sloane Whitaker 4 words. Remove her. No scene. I did not know any of that. All I knew was that the beautiful woman in the black dress was suddenly, out of nowhere, in a hurry. Her tablet had buzzed. She glanced at it, and whatever she read there changed her from cold to urgent. She stepped in close to me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, expensive and sharp. You need to leave. Now, she said low and fast. You are causing a disturbance, and I will have security escort you out. I have not raised my voice one time, I said, because I had not. Marisol, she called over her shoulder, sharp, and a young housekeeper in a gray uniform froze near the elevators with an armful of folded linens. I looked at that young woman, at her gray uniform, at the way her shoulders came up around her ears when the boss barked her name, and I saw myself. 30 years ago, that was me, holding linens, hoping not to be noticed. Get the side door, Sloane snapped at her. We are taking this lady out the service exit. The service exit. She wanted to walk me out through the back, through the kitchens and the loading dock where the garbage goes. so that none of the beautiful people would have to see me, so that I would leave the way the trash leaves. And something in me, some deep old thing, said no. I spent my whole life going in the service door, I said. 31 years. I am not going out one tonight. I stepped past her, toward the grand staircase, toward the gold light, thinking only that if I could get to the top of the stairs, if I could just get high enough for my son to see me over the crowd. And Sloane grabbed my arm. I am an old woman. She was strong and I was not. When she grabbed my arm and yanked me back, I stumbled, and I reached out on instinct, the way you reach for anything when you are falling, and my hand caught the sleeve of her black dress. That was all. My hand on her sleeve. She looked down at my old, spotted, scarred hand on the fabric of her dress like I had put something diseased on her. And she slapped me. You already know the sound. That crack off the marble up into the chandeliers. My head snapped sideways. My glasses flew off my face and skittered across the floor. And I went down. Old bones do not stay up when they are hit. I went down onto that beautiful cold floor, onto one hip and one hand, and the pain of the fall was worse than the slap, and I felt my lips split against my own teeth and the warm copper taste come into my mouth. And the lobby went silent. That terrible, expensive silence. Sloane stood over me, her hands still up in the air, trembling, her own eyes a little shocked at what her body had just done. And into that silence she said it, loud, to justify herself to the watching crowd. Get this filth out of my lobby. I lay on the floor of my son's most beautiful building, with blood on my lip, and I did the only thing I had left to do. I looked for a kind face, and I found one. Young Theo from the door had pushed his way to the front of the crowd, and his face had gone white, and he was staring at me, and then he was staring at something on the wall behind the front desk, and then back at me. Because on the wall behind the front desk of the Aurelia, in a place of honor, there was a large framed black and white photograph. It was the founder's favorite. Everyone who worked there knew the story of it. It was a photograph Julian had insisted be hung in every lobby he ever built. It was a photograph of a young woman in a housekeeping uniform, standing in front of an old hotel, squinting into the sun, with a brass pin on her chest. It was me, 40 years ago. Julian had hung his mother on the wall of every hotel he owned, and no one had ever once connected the proud young woman in the photograph to the old woman they walked past on the street. Theo looked at the photograph. He looked at me on the floor, and his mouth fell open. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Oh my God, that is her. That is the woman in the picture." And that is the exact moment my son came down the stairs. Julian had heard something. A commotion carries, even through the music of a gala. He had come to the top of the grand staircase to see what the disturbance was. Annoyed, ready to let Adrian handle it, the way Adrian handled everything. And he looked down into his own lobby and saw an old black woman in a brown coat lying on his marble floor with blood on her lip and her glasses 6 feet away from her hand. Later, he told me he did not recognize me at first. He told me his mind refused it. The woman on the floor could not be the woman on his wall, could not be the woman who untied his shoelaces, because that woman lived in a soft golden place in his memory where nothing bad reached her. For one full second, his brain simply would not let the two women be the same person. And then I lifted my head, and I found his eyes across all that distance, and I said one word, not loud. It did not need to be loud. The whole room had gone silent for it. Julian, and I watched 40 years fall on my son at once. He came down those stairs. I have never seen a man move like that. He did not walk and he did not run. He came down like water breaking through a dam, shoving through the crowd of the most important people in the city like they were furniture. And he hit his knees on the marble beside me so hard I heard it. And his big hands were on my face, so gentle, turning it toward the light, seeing the blood on my lip. "Mama," he said, and his voice broke on it right down the middle. "Mama, what are you doing here? What happened? Who did this?" I could not answer. I was crying too hard, and not from the pain. I was crying because my son's face was 2 inches from mine, and I could finally see, that whatever I had believed about him being ashamed of me was a lie. It was written all over him. He was not ashamed. He was destroyed. Mr. Vane, Sloane started, her voice climbing, panic setting in as the ground moved under her. Mr. Vane, I am so sorry. This woman was causing a disturbance. She was claiming to be. She said she was your. Julian rose to his feet. I have told you my son is a kind man. He is. But I had never, in all his life, seen the thing that came into his face then. It was very quiet. That was the frightening part. It was not shouting. It was the stillness of something that has decided. She said she was my mother, Julian said. Sloane's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Because she is my mother, Julian said, and his voice carried to every corner of that silent, golden marble room. Her name is Loretta Vane. That is her photograph on the wall behind you. That is the woman who cleaned hotel rooms for 31 years so that I could stand up here in this suit. And you? His voice dropped, and it was worse quiet than it would have been loud. You put your hands on her. He looked around the lobby then, at all those beautiful people, at the whole shining world he had built. Get out, he said. All of you. The gala is over. Get out of my building. They took me up in a private elevator, my son holding me like I was made of glass. Theo, the young doorman, insisting on carrying my purse and my recovered glasses because he needed something to do with his hands. A hotel doctor already on the way. And I want to tell you that everything was healed in that elevator. It was not. Because a body can go up in an elevator, but the truth was still down in that lobby, and the truth had to come out, and the truth was going to hurt worse than any slap. We sat in a quiet suite high above the city. The doctor cleaned my lip and told me nothing was broken, only bruised, and that I was tougher than I looked. I told him I had always been tougher than I looked. Julian sat holding my hand the whole time and would not let it go. When the doctor left, my son finally asked me the question I had been dreading for 2 years. Mama, he said, and his voice was so careful, so afraid of the answer. Why did you cut me off? I looked at him. Why did I cut you off? I said. You stopped calling, he said. 2 years ago. You stopped calling on Sundays, and Adrian told me, he said you wanted your privacy, you did not want the money, you did not want any part of this life. He said the kindest thing I could do was leave you alone. And I did. God forgive me, I did. Because I thought I was respecting you. And I felt the whole world tilt. Julian, I said very slowly, because I needed him to hear every word. I never stopped calling you. You stopped calling me. A woman started answering your phone and telling me you were in a meeting. And I wrote you letters. I wrote you letters every month for 2 years. His face changed. What letters? Mama, I never got any letters. They came back, I said. Return to sender. Every one of them. I have a shoebox full of them at home. I thought you had told the post office not to accept anything from me. I thought, and here my voice finally broke, I thought you were ashamed of me. My son looked at me like I had struck him. Ashamed of you, he whispered. Mama, your picture is on the wall of every building I own. I tell your story in every interview I have ever given. There is not a person in my company who does not know that everything I am because of a woman who cleaned rooms. Ashamed of you? And then I watched it happen. I watched my son, who is very, very smart, put the pieces together in real time. I watched the color drain out of his face. 2 years of silence. A woman answering his phone who was told to intercept my calls. Letters marked return to sender before they reached him. A trusted voice, always at his elbow, always so gentle, telling him his mother wanted to be left alone. Adrian, he said. It was not a question. It was a man watching his whole understanding of the last 2 years catch fire. There was a knock at the door of the suite. Soft, apologetic. And Adrian Cole let himself in, because he always let himself in. That was his privilege. and he had a tablet in his hand and a face full of concern arranged as carefully as flowers. "Julian," he said. "Thank God. Are you all right? This is a catastrophe. We need to get ahead of it. I have already got the communications team drafting a—" "Where are her letters, Adrian?" Adrian stopped. The room was very still. "I am sorry," Adrian said. "My mother wrote me letters," Julian said, standing up slowly. "Every month. For 2 years. They came back to her marked return to sender. She has a shoebox full of them. So they went somewhere first before they went back. Somebody in my company sent them back." "Where are her letters, Adrian?" I watched Adrian Cole decide, in that moment, to lie. I watched him take a breath to do it. And I watched him look at my face, at the blood dried on my lip, at his 15 years of careful work lying in ruins on the floor between us. And I watched him understand that there was no lie left that would fit through that door. So instead he did the thing that people like him do when they are caught. He explained. He justified. He made it sound like wisdom. "Julian," he said. And his voice was so reasonable, so smooth. "Everything I did for you. For this." He gestured at the window, at the whole lit-up city. "You were building something no one in your family had ever built. Something fragile. And I watched you, every time she called, I watched you get soft. You would take a call from her and for the rest of the day you were a boy again. Second-guessing, hesitating, wanting to give money away, wanting to slow down. I could not let one woman undo everything we built. I was protecting you. I was protecting the company. You were protecting yourself," Julian said. "I was protecting all of it," Adrian said. And for the first time his smoothness cracked, and something ugly and honest came through. "You would not be standing in this building if I had let you spend the last 15 years running home to your mother. You would have given it all away by now. Every dollar. You know it is true. Somebody had to keep your eyes on the road. That was me. That was always me. And you have the nerve to look at me like I am the villain. And here is the part one am proud of my son for, because it is the hard part." Julian did not hit him. He did not scream. He did not throw him through the window, which is what a movie would have wanted. He stood very still, and there were tears standing in his eyes, and he said, "You are not the villain because you are cruel, Adrian. You are the villain because you decided you knew better than me who I was allowed to love. You took 2 years from me. You took 2 years from her. She thought her own son was ashamed of her. For 2 years she went to sleep believing that, because of you. There is no version of protecting me that includes that. There never was." He walked to the door and opened it. "You are done here. Not just tonight. Done. Legal will be in touch, and there is going to be a full audit of everything that went through your hands, because I do not believe for 1 second that my mother's letters are the only thing you decided you knew better about. Get out of my hotel." Adrian looked at me then. For the first time all night, he looked at me directly. And I will tell you what I did because people always ask. I did not curse him. I did not gloat. I looked at a man who had stolen 2 years of my son from me, and I felt, more than anything, tired. "You could have just let us talk," I said. "That is all it would have taken. 1 phone call and none of this happens. All those years you spent building a wall. And it was never even a wall we asked for." He had nothing to say to that. He left. Now, you want to know what happened to Sloane? I know you do. Everyone always wants to know what happened to the one who did the hitting. She was gone from the company by morning, of course. You cannot lay hands on an elderly woman on a marble floor in front of the most important people in the city and keep your job, and you should not, and I do not lose 1 minute of sleep over her losing it. There were consequences beyond that too, legal ones, the kind that come when you strike another person, and those took their own course through their own channels and I let them because a slap is a slap and the law is the law. But I asked to see her before it was all finished. Julian did not want me to. He thought I owed her nothing, and he was right, I did not. But I did not do it for her. I did it for me. She was brought to the same quiet suite 2 days later. She had been crying. Her tight hair had come loose. She looked 10 years older and about half as sure of herself, and she could not meet my eyes. "I do not have a speech for you," I told her. "I only have a thing I want you to know, and then you can go." She waited. "When you looked at me in that lobby," I said, "you saw an old coat and a safety pin and you decided you knew everything about me. You decided I was nothing. And I want you to know what you were actually looking at. You were looking at 31 years of cleaning rooms exactly like the ones in this hotel. Every woman in a gray uniform you have ever snapped at. Every housekeeper whose name you did not bother to learn. Every tired person you have walked past because they could do nothing for you. That was me. For 31 years, that was me. You did not slap a stranger who wandered in off the street. You slapped every single one of them. You slapped the people who make your whole beautiful world possible, and you slapped them because you were certain, absolutely certain, that they did not matter." She was crying again. "I did not enjoy it. I want to be clear about that. There is no pleasure for me in another woman's ruin. I am not telling you this to punish you," I said. "The world is going to do that on its own, and I am not going to stand in its way. I am telling you because I want it to be the thing you remember for the rest of your life. Be kind to the ones who carry the trays. That is all. That is the whole lesson. It cost you everything, and it would have cost you nothing." She left. I never saw her again. I hope she learned it. I truly do. But I said my piece, and I let her go because carrying hatred at my age is a suitcase too heavy to lift. My son wanted to give me everything. That was the first thing once the dust settled. He wanted to buy me a penthouse, a car, a nurse, a whole new life. He sat in my little apartment on the west side, this billionaire, this man on television, folded up too big for my kitchen chair with the wobbly leg, and he begged me to let him take care of me. And I said no. I watched his face fall, and I took his hands, the same hands I used to wash before dinner, and I told him the truth. "Julian, baby, I do not want a penthouse. I do not want a car. I spent 2 years thinking you did not want me, and I do not need $1 single to fix that. I just need you back. I need 7 o'clock on Sundays. I need the sound of you. The rest of it, all this money, it is yours. You earned it. It does not interest me one bit." He argued. Of course he argued. And we found our way, the way families do, to the middle of it. I would not take the penthouse. But I let him fix the radiator because the knocking really was terrible, and I let him replace the coat. That was the hardest one. The brown wool coat, Elijah's coat with the safety pin. I did not want to give it up. But Julian took it gently and he had it cleaned and mended. The button matched at last, properly this time, and he had it framed in a glass case. And do you know where it hangs now? It hangs in the lobby of the Aurelia, right next to the black and white photograph of a young woman in a housekeeping uniform. A plaque underneath it says only this: "She built all of it. Be kind to the ones who carry the trays." Every person who works in that building walks past it on their first day. And they are told the story. The story of the night the staff slapped a woman in a mended coat, not knowing she was the reason the whole building existed. And I did take one thing from my son. One thing. I asked him to start a fund. A real one, with real money, the kind of money I will never understand. A fund for the housekeepers, the dishwashers, the night desk clerks, the people in the gray uniforms whose names nobody bothers to learn. Money for their children's schooling. Money for the ones who get sick and cannot work. Dignity turned into dollars aimed straight at the people the world walks past. We named it after his father, the Elijah Vane Fund, because Elijah gave me that coat, and that coat is what started all of it. Young Theo, the doorman who told me the top step was slick, who carried my purse, who was the only person in that entire lobby brave enough to look at me like I was a human being. My son did not forget him. Theo did not want anything. He kept saying he had just done his job. But Julian sat that young man down and told him that his job, the actual job, the one under all the other jobs, is to see people. And Theo had seen me when a room full of important people had refused to. My son moved that young man up in the company so fast it made his head spin, And last I heard Theo is training other people now, teaching them how to run a front desk, and the first thing he tells every single one of them, I am told, is a story about an old woman in a brown coat. That made me happier than almost anything else in this whole story. Because one kind young man got to keep being kind and got rewarded for it, and now he is teaching kindness to others. That is how the good things spread, if you let them. The same way the bad things do, just in the other direction. So that is the whole story. That is how a woman in a coat that cost $12 ended up bleeding on a floor worth more than the house I raised my son in. And people ask me when I tell it whether I am angry. After everything. The slap, the letters, the 2 stolen years, the man who built a wall out of my son's love and called it protection. And the honest answer is no. Not anymore. Anger is another suitcase, and I have already told you how I feel about heavy suitcases at my age. But I did learn something, and I will leave it with you because a story with no lesson is just noise. Here is what I learned. The way a person treats someone who can do nothing for them is the truest thing you will ever know about that person. Sloane looked at me and saw someone who could give her nothing, and so she felt free to give me nothing back, less than nothing, and it cost her everything because the world is far more connected than the cruel ever believe. The old woman in the mended coat is somebody's mother. The man in the gray uniform mopping the floor at midnight raised a doctor. The woman you snapped at is a wall in some photograph on somebody's shelf. Cherished, whole worlds behind that tired face. You do not know who you are talking to. You never really do. And so the only safe way, the only decent way, the only way that lets you sleep, is to be kind to every single one of them. Not because of who they might turn out to be, but because of who you already are. Be kind to the ones who carry the trays. They see everything. And they remember everyone. Now let me ask you something before you go. Have you ever been the one in the mended coat, standing in a room full of people who decided they already knew everything about you? Or, if you are honest, brutally honest, have you ever been the one who looked at somebody and decided they did not matter? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and I remember everyone.